She was standing in the fire, smiling. The flames danced around her like they were alive, twisting, laughing, whispering secrets. Her long black hair flowed in the smoke, and her eyes, they were glowing. Not red, not yellow, something worse, like the cold light of something not human. 13-year-old Valerie should have been screaming, but instead, she was whispering a prayer in a language no one should ever speak. Up above, the convent bells rang, but no one was pulling the rope. It was midnight. The sky was black. The rain had just stopped, and the scent of wet ash filled the air. St. Agnes Convent was quiet, too quiet. All the other nuns were asleep. But down in the basement, something evil had begun, and someone was watching. 15-year-old Maria, Valerie's older sister, stood at the top of the stairs. Her hands were shaking. She had followed Valerie down here after noticing her sneak away from bed. But she never expected this. The basement chapel was dark and ruined. Broken statues, candles melted to the floor. Strange symbols painted on the walls in something red. Maybe paint, maybe blood. And in the center, Valerie stood, barefoot, inside a circle. She wasn't praying to God. She was calling something else. "Valerie," Maria whispered. "What are you doing?" Her sister looked up slowly. Her face was calm, but there was something wrong in her smile. "They lied to us," Valerie said. "The nuns, the priests, even God. But I found something else, something stronger. And now, I'm never going to be afraid again." Maria stepped closer, afraid but desperate. "You are scaring me. Come back. Please. We'll be punished." Valerie just laughed softly. "You are the one who will be punished, Maria. You told them about me. You brought them into this." Before Maria could stop her, Valerie held up a burning match. "Goodbye, sister." She dropped it into the circle. Boom! The entire basement exploded in fire. The symbols on the walls lit up with a ghostly light. The flames burnt normal. They moved like they had a mind of their own. The candles melted upward. The shadows screamed. Maria was thrown back against the stairs, her ears ringing, the heat burning her skin. She ran. She didn't look back. Behind her, the room caved in. Smoke poured out of the cracks. She could still hear Valerie's voice whispering her name. "Maria." That was the last time anyone saw Valerie. Her body was never found. They said she was lost in the fire. But Maria knew the truth. She didn't die. She became something else. And now, 22 years later, she's coming back. 22 years later, the wind howled through the empty halls of St. Agnes Convent. The walls were old, cold, and cracked with age. Candles flickered, wooden floors creaked, and the silence was never truly silent. It was just past midnight. Sister Maria, now 37, stood alone in the chapel, whispering prayers under her breath. Her face was pale, tired. She had never truly slept in years, not since the night of the fire. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Valerie. But lately, things were getting worse. Doors opening by themselves. Cold air where there should be none. Footsteps in the hallway, but no one there. Shadows that moved, even when nothing else did. And then tonight, something different happened. As Maria knelt before the altar, her rosary beads tight in her hand, she heard it. A whisper. Soft, faint, like it was coming from inside the wall behind the altar. Maria. She froze. Her blood turned cold. She looked over her shoulder. No one. She listened harder. And there it was again. The same voice, same name, same softness. Maria, you left me. Her heart pounded in her chest. That voice, it sounded just like Valerie, but it couldn't be. Valerie was dead, wasn't she? Maria slowly stood up and stepped closer to the wall. She placed her hand on the cold stone. Her fingers trembled. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft knocks from the inside. She gasped and stepped back, her breath shallow. No, she whispered. You are not real. But then, the candles behind her blew out all at once. The chapel was now in darkness. Only moonlight from the stained glass lit the room. Maria turned toward the large mirror beside the altar. Something made her look, as if someone was staring at her through it. She saw her own reflection, but standing behind her was another nun, taller, dressed in black, face covered in a dark veil, but her eyes glowing faint yellow, piercing through the veil. And slowly, a wide, twisted smile began to form. Valak. Maria turned around, but no one was there. She looked back at the mirror. Now, it showed only herself, alone. She backed away from the altar, heart racing, whispering prayers too fast to understand. Her hand clutched the rosary so tightly the beads snapped and scattered across the stone floor. She ran out of the chapel, not looking back. But behind her, the mirror cracked. A voice echoed in the empty room. You can run, Maria, but you brought me back. The candle had blown out. Rook sat frozen in her bed, the open diary still in her lap, her heart thumping so hard it echoed in her ears. The room was silent, but not empty. Something was in the hallway. She could feel it. She could hear it. Ruth. The whisper came again, soft, broken, like the voice of someone who hadn't spoken in years. It wasn't angry, not yet. It was curious, like a child playing in the dark. Rook stood up slowly, holding the candle with one hand and clutching the diary with the other. She opened the door just a crack. The hallway outside was empty, but the air was thick, heavy, like it didn't want her to breathe. She stepped out barefoot, her steps silent on the cold floor. As she moved down the corridor, she noticed something strange. The candles lining the hallway were already lit. She hadn't lit them. No one had. And yet, they burned, faint blue flames that cast long, twisting shadows on the walls. Suddenly, one candle flickered out by itself, then the next, and the next. One by one, each candle died, following her, until she was standing alone in complete darkness. Then she heard it, a low sound, breathing, right behind her ear. She spun around, nothing. But on the wall beside her, scratched in fresh black soot, were 3 chilling words. She never left. Ruth ran. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. But she ran, through the empty halls, down the narrow stairs, back into the chapel where she had last seen Sister Maria. She found her kneeling at the altar again, whispering faster than before, her voice shaking. Maria. Rook called out, breathless. Something's here. It whispered to me. It knows my name. Maria didn't turn around. Did you open it? She asked quietly. What? The diary. Rook held it tightly in her hands. Yes, I. Maria turned to face her. Tears were running down her cheeks. Then it's already begun. Valerie has found her way back. Ruth felt her knees weaken. But how? She's dead. Maria looked into her eyes, and for the first time, Rook saw the weight of 2 decades of guilt. She didn't die in the fire. Not like they said. They locked her down there, and I let them. Now she wants something from me, from us. Forgiveness or blood. That night, as the storm returned and rain lashed the windows, Ruth tried to sleep. But she couldn't, because just past midnight, the voices returned. Not whispers this time, laughter, and outside her door, slow, dragging footsteps. Something barefoot, something wet, and then, tap, 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 3 knocks on her door. She held her breath. Underneath the door, a faint shadow moved. Then a voice whispered low, "Let me in, sister." The storm outside had grown wild. Rain slammed against the convent windows like fists. Lightning cracked across the sky, lighting the stone walls in flashes of white. Thunder growled like a beast beneath the floor. Inside, Sister Maria stood in front of a door she hadn't opened in 22 years. The meter room. No one used it anymore. It had been sealed after the fire, but tonight it had somehow unlocked itself. Maria's hand shook as she gripped the cold doorknob. Behind her, Ruth stood silent, holding a candle, the light trembling in her hands. "Why this room?" Rook whispered. Maria didn't answer right away. Her voice was distant, like she was already remembering something painful. "This is where I last saw her, before the fire." She turned the knob. The door creaked open. Inside, the room was dusty, untouched. 12 tall, cracked meters lined the walls. Their silver glass was faded and fogged, but they still reflected just enough to show you weren't alone. Maria stepped inside slowly. Her reflection followed. So did Ruth's. But something was wrong. In one of the mirrors, there was a third figure, a nun, standing still, veiled in black, not moving, not real. Rook turned quickly, but the space behind them was empty. She stared at the mirror again. The figure was still there, closer now. Maria gasped and stepped back. The door slammed shut behind them. All the candles blew out. The room went cold, and the mirrors began to whisper. Thousands of tiny voices, like wine through broken glass, whispering the same name. Valerie, Valerie, Valerie. One mirror began to crack, then another, until the glass shattered in a loud scream, and in the largest mirror at the front of the room, she appeared. Valerie wailed, smiling, her eyes glowing gold beneath the black lace. Her head tilted like a doll's, staring through the mirror at her sister. Maria froze. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't know they would hurt you." Valerie stepped forward, but only in the reflection. The real room was still empty, but in the mirror, she was walking, slow, stiff, her bare feet covered in soot and blood. "You knew," the voice whispered. "You watched me burn. Now, you will see what I saw." Suddenly, Maria's reflection disappeared, replaced by a burning version of herself, screaming in agony. Rook screamed and covered her eyes. The mirrors cracked again. Glass fell like rain. The reflections turned to fire. And then, silence. The lights flickered back. The mirrors were shattered. All of them, except one. In the last mirror, in the far corner, stood Valak, unmoving. But this time, her face was visible. It was Valerie, eyes sunken, skin pale, lips stitched shut with shadow. And as Rook stared in horror, Valerie raised one finger and pointed directly at her. That night, Rook couldn't sleep. Even under the heavy wool blanket, she shivered, not from cold, but from what she had seen in the mirror room. That face, that finger pointing at her. Why her? She didn't even know Valerie, but something inside her whispered, "You were chosen." Just before dawn, Rook woke suddenly. No thunder, no storm, just a sound, a slow, distant scraping, like something heavy being dragged across stone. It was coming from beneath her bed. She leaned over. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. Instead, it grew louder. By morning, Sister Maria looked pale. She hadn't spoken a word since last night. She stared at the floor during prayer, mumbling words that made no sense. We left her down there. She called, and I didn't answer. She's not just haunting us. She's becoming us. Rook gently touched her arm. "What's happening to me?" Maria finally looked up, her voice hoarse. "It's time you saw the basement door." Later that day, as the other sisters tended to their morning duties, Maria led Rook through the old hallway, the one behind the chapel where few ever went. The air grew damp. The walls were cracked. They reached a rusted metal gate, chained and bolted shut. It looked ancient, forgotten. Above it, carved in Latin, were the words, "Silence shall not awaken the damned." Maria reached into her sleeve and pulled out a heavy iron key, shaking as she inserted it into the lock. The chains groaned open. The gate creaked wide, and behind it, a stone staircase leading into blackness. "I was 12, Maria whispered as they stepped inside. "She made me swear not to tell anyone about the books, about the spells she found." "What spells?" Ruth asked, but Maria didn't answer. They reached the bottom, and there it was, the basement door, burnt, cracked, still stained with soot from the fire 22 years ago. But someone, or something, had recently scratched into the wood, deep claw marks, and a word, "Sister." Suddenly, knocking. From the other side of the door. 3 knocks, then silence, then again, 3 knocks. Rook stumbled back, clutching her cross, but Maria didn't move. She raised her hand and placed it on the door. It felt warm, too warm, like a beating heart. Then, a whisper directly in Ruth's ear. "Let me out, or she'll take you next." Maria stepped away from the door. "We buried her alive," she said. "She wasn't dead, not yet. We were told to lock it and never return." "And now?" Rook asked, her voice trembling. Maria looked into the darkness. "Now she's not alone anymore." That night, as the convent fell into silence, a strange unease clung to the air. Even the wind outside had stopped, as if nature itself was holding its breath. At exactly midnight, the silence shattered. Dong, a deep, rusty bell sound echoed across the stone walls of the convent. Dong. The sisters woke with gasps. Dawn. They stared at one another in horror. The bell tower had been silent for 22 years, ever since the night of the fire. The bell's ropes had been cut, and no one dared climb the tower since. But tonight, it rang by itself. Rook shot up from her bed, heart racing. The sound vibrated through her bones. From the hallway, she heard frantic footsteps. Then a knock. It was Maria. "She's calling," Maria whispered, her eyes wide. She always said the bell would ring before her return. Rook tried to speak, but her throat tightened with fear. Maria grabbed a candle. "You must see it." Together, they climbed the spiral staircase of the old bell tower. The walls were coated in dust and cobwebs. The higher they went, the colder it grew, not a normal chill, but a biting, unnatural cold. Halfway up, the candle flickered violently, nearly going out. Then Rook stopped. A figure was standing ahead on the steps, unmoving, back turned, a nun's habit. But it was floating, swaying, not touching the ground. "Sister?" Rook whispered. The figure turned. No face, only a mouth, sewn shut with black thread. Suddenly, the bell rang again, right above them. The sound was deafening. Maria screamed and covered her ears. The faceless nun vanished in a blink. They burst into the bell room, gasping. The huge bell hung there, unmoved, but the rope was dangling, slowly swaying. Rook stepped closer. At the base of the bell, something was scrawled in fresh blood. "Bring her back." Maria dropped to her knees. "It's her. She's rising." Suddenly, the trapdoor in the floor creaked. From below, a voice whispered, "Maria." Ruth backed away, but Maria stood frozen. "She knows I'm here." Then, a gust of wind blew out the candle. Darkness, complete and terrifying. Rook fumbled in her pocket for a match. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Scratch. The match lit, and in that faint orange glow, Valerie's burned face appeared right behind Maria, her eyes black, lips torn, blood dripping. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." Rook screamed. The match went out. In the dark, the bell began ringing again, faster, louder, maddening. From every corner of the room came whispers. "Sister, sister, sister, sister." Then silence. When Ruth opened her eyes again, Maria was gone. Only her rosary remained, melted onto the wooden floor. The chapel was empty, lit only by faint candlelight that flickered like dying breath. Rook sat alone in the pews, her mind spinning with images from the bell tower, the face, the whispers, and most of all, Maria's disappearance. She clutched Maria's melted rosary in her hand, knuckles white. "What did you know, Maria?" she whispered. "What weren't you telling me?" That's when she remembered. Maria had often slipped away to the old confessional booth in the East Wing. Even after all these years, even after her faith had crumbled, Maria still went there alone. And sometimes, Rook had heard her talking to herself. That night, while the others slept, Ruth returned to the East Wing. The confessional was cold, abandoned. Dust blanketed the floor like snow. The heavy curtain swayed slightly, as though someone had just been there. She pulled it aside. Inside, on the bench, was a small cassette recorder. Taped to it, a yellow note in Maria's handwriting. "If I disappear, press play." Ruth's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers trembled as she clicked the button. A soft hiss, and then Maria's voice, broken and afraid. "Forgive me, Father, for what I am about to confess is not of this world. I've kept this secret for 22 years. I buried it like we buried her, but some things don't stay buried. My sister Valerie, she wasn't just a girl. She was chosen. She found an old book hidden in the convent library. Pages filled with symbols, rituals, things written in blood. She said it called to her, that she could hear voices in her dreams, a woman in black robes whispering promises of power, of love. Valerie believed she could summon a saint, but it wasn't a saint. It was Valak. Ruth froze. The name sent a chill through her spine. That night, I followed her into the basement. The candles, the chants. I tried to stop her. I screamed, but it was too late. The fire, it wasn't an accident. It was the prize. She didn't die in the fire, Ruth. She was taken. And I helped them seal her. Not bury. Seal. We placed her behind the wall, beneath the old statue of Saint Agatha. The convent told the world she died, but her body, it's still here. I hear her every night now, in my dreams, in the walls. I think she's awake. She wants me, but worse, she wants you. She's coming for you, Rook. The recorder clicked off. Silence. Rook sat frozen, her breath shallow. Then, from the shadows of the chapel, a soft scratching sound. From behind the statue of Saint Agatha. She turned slowly. The stone was cracked. The floor beneath it, disturbed, as if something had tried to claw its way out. And scratched into the base of the statue were 5 words. Ruth ran, out of the chapel, down the corridor. Her feet barely touched the floor as she fled, but the voice echoed behind her, Valerie's voice, distorted, roaring, soaked in hatred. "You took my place, sister." She stumbled into the cold hallway and didn't stop until she reached the old library. The doors creaked open, and she slammed them shut behind her. Her chest heaved. Her hands were slick with sweat. The library was still. Dust danced in the shafts of moonlight cutting through stained glass windows. The silence here was different. Not peaceful, waiting. She remembered the cassette. Maria had mentioned a book. Ancient, bound in skin, hidden in this very room. "The Book of 9 Whales," Ruth muttered. "That's what you found, Valerie, wasn't it?" She moved between the shelves like a shadow, her fingers scanning the spines of forgotten texts, until a hollow click. Behind a row of encyclopedias, a section of shelving gave way. A hidden alcove. Inside sat a thick, cracked book, dark leather cover, a lock on the side, broken. Symbols carved into its surface that seemed to crawl when she stared too long. She opened it. The pages oozed a strange dampness. Ancient symbols, drawings of women in nun habits, twisted by demonic horns and serpents. Instructions for rituals, blood rites, names of demons. At the center, a ritual called the Vow of Mirrors, binding the sister's soul. She read aloud, her voice trembling. 2 born of blood, 1 to open, 1 to receive, mirror and flame, life and death. Only together may the gate stay closed. Ruth's eyes widened. Valerie didn't want to summon Valak. She wanted to bind herself to him. And I. The realization struck her like ice. I was the other half, the one meant to seal the gate. She needed me then. She still needs me now. And that's why Maria tried to keep her hidden all these years. Why she tried to destroy the book. Why she left the recording. But something had changed. Valerie wasn't just haunting the convent. She was trying to finish what she started. Suddenly, the library's temperature dropped. A whisper swirled in the air. You always had the light, Ruth. I had the shadows. Let's make it whole again. Behind her, the shelves rattled violently. Books flung themselves off. Candles exploded into flame. The shadows stretched into clawed shapes. And from the dark, Valerie stepped out, not as a girl, not as a ghost, but something else. Her eyes were black voids. Her habit was tattered, fused with something ancient and evil. Her hands burned with symbols glowing red. I waited long enough, Valerie hissed. Time to take what was mine. Ruth turned and ran, but this time, not from fear. She clutched the book tight. If this is what you want, then I'll finish it. I'll end what you started. She would return to the basement where it all began. The seal wasn't broken yet, but blood would be spilled before dawn. The stone steps groaned beneath Ruth's weight as she descended into the ruins of the old basement chapel, the place where the fire had started 22 years ago. The air was thick with soot and time. A heavy, unnatural silence clung to every wall. The deeper she went, the colder it became. And yet, sweat rolled down her spine, not from heat, but from something watching her. Something waiting. The old ritual room lay ahead, lit only by flickering candles that she hadn't lit. They were already burning. Someone, or something, had prepared the space. On the ground, the ritual circle was still there, blackened symbols etched in blood and ash. At the center, a mirror, cracked and covered in dust. Rook stepped forward. If this is the only way, she whispered, then so be it. She opened the Book of Nine Whales. Her fingers turned the pages until they landed on the ritual of severance, a forbidden spell to unbind soul-bound entities. The margins warned, only blood can cleanse what blood has bound. Valerie, I'm going to set us both free. Suddenly, a cold wind. The flames dimmed. Behind her, the whisper came. No, Rook, you are going to stay forever. Valerie appeared. Her feet didn't touch the ground. Her veil drifted like underwater smoke. Her face was no longer fully human, twisted by years in the other realm. Her eyes gleamed with demonic light, and behind her, a tall shadow loomed, a shape horned, inhuman. Valak. Valerie raised her hand. Join me, Rook. Finish the ritual. Sister to sister. Flesh to flame. But Rook stepped inside the circle, holding the book open. No, I'm not finishing your ritual. I'm ending it. She began to read the severance spell aloud. Through blood and mirror, bond undone. By ash and flame, I break what's spun. Sister's soul, return to rest. Leave the living. End this test. Valerie shrieked. The candles blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then, a scream unlike anything human. It tore through the walls. Valerie lunged at her, but the circle glowed red-hot, stopping her inches from Ruth's face. You can't leave me alone again. Valerie sobbed, her voice warping between girl and demon. You were never alone, Rook whispered. But you chose the dark. Rook took the final step. She drew a blade from her coat pocket, the one Maria had left for her. Blood for blood. With trembling hands, Ruth cut her palm and let the blood drip onto the mirror. The mirror cracked again, deeper, glowing from within. Valerie screamed as her body contorted, sucked toward the mirror. The shadows screamed you, like 1,000 tormented souls being dragged into a void. Valak's form disintegrated into dust and black fire, roaring in rage. The room exploded in white light. And then, silence. When Ruth opened her eyes, the candles were gone. The mirror was shattered, the ritual circle erased, and Valerie was no more. She looked down at her bloodied hand. The wound was gone. A piece fell over the basement that hadn't existed in decades. But as Rook turned to leave, she saw something in the corner. Maria, or a vision of her, smiling softly. You did it, the vision whispered. You ended it. Then she vanished like smoke. Rook climbed the steps back to the convent, the book now sealed, the evil silenced. But behind her, buried beneath stone and memory, a tiny flicker of black flame still pulsed beneath the rubble, waiting. 12 years later, the convent no longer stood. After the fire and what happened in the basement, it was torn down, sealed forever. But some things don't stay buried. Ruth had moved to a quiet village far from the ruins. She no longer wore her habit. She lived as a teacher now, helping children read, hiding her scars behind warm smiles and silent nights. Until one rainy evening, the church bell rang. Strange, no one had touched that bell in years. She stepped outside. At the church gate stood a young nun in black, completely soaked from the rain. She had her head bowed, hands clutching a rosary. "Can I help you, sister?" Rook asked gently. The nun looked up. Her face was young, but the eyes were old. Too old. Familiar. Ruth's heart dropped. She took a step back. "Valerie." The young nun didn't answer, but smiled. A slow, unnatural curl of her lips. "They said I was gone. But you know better, don't you, Sister Ruth?" Suddenly, the rain stopped. The vine died. And everything, the trees, the birds, the distant thunder, went still. The nun stepped forward, dripping not just rain, but black water. Rook whispered a prayer under her breath, clutching her old crucifix. "You were destroyed. I saw you vanish. You ended the ritual, but not the bloodline," the nun whispered, tilting her head. "You and I are the same. Mirrors, flesh and soul." She opened her palm. Inside was a shard of the broken mirror, still glowing. Ruth gasped. The light from the shard pulsed, and the sky turned crimson. A deep rumble echoed through the ground. Behind the nun, a shadow appeared once more, horned, monstrous, crawling out of the earth. Valak had returned, but this time, Rook was ready. She held her crucifix high, whispered one last prayer, but this one wasn't for protection. It was for sacrifice. "Let this end with me." The crucifix glowed white hot. As the demon lunged forward, Ruth stepped into the light and offered her soul in exchange. "No more sisters, no more blood. Take me." There was a flash, like heaven splitting open. A scream, so loud it shattered windows across the village. And then silence. Again. Forever. Epilogue. They found the church empty the next morning. No signs of struggle. No body. No shadow. Just a single black veil and a cross still glowing faintly on the ground. No one ever rang that bell again. But on stormy nights, villagers swear they see two sisters walking by the chapel ruins, one in white, one in black, whispering prayers that no one dares to answer. If this tale left a chill down your spine, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button because every new listener helps the roots of the English-speaking tree grow deeper into the unknown. Let's keep feeding the darkness together.